And welcome back to Spinny Explains IT. I'm sorry I got some messes in the back. Got a bunch of boxes. We just moved into our new home. Pretty awesome and exciting, but you don't care. You want to hear about IT. That's why I'm here. So today, I actually wanted to talk about a couple things. I'm going to dive into, we're going to talk about DSL, fiber, and cable when it comes to internet. And so I guess really I'm going to be talking about different things inside of that, but really it's just internet delivery, services, providers, and such. Okay, the first thing you need to know about it is internet speeds are always done in bits. So you're going to hear megabits per second, okay? It's not bytes. Bytes is storage, okay? They're two different things. You know, if you're dealing with speeds, typically going to be bits. You're dealing with storage, it's going to be bytes, okay? Bits are smaller than bytes. I can get into that later. But just know that. So, if like you're talking to someone on the phone, some internet provider, and he's like, okay, we can get you 900 megabits per second up to a terabyte of data cap or whatever. And you may be like, what an idiot. He just said bits and then bytes. It's totally different, okay? He's actually not an idiot. That's correct. Storage is bytes. Speeds are bits. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, we can go into some of this internet junk. So, with the internet, there are technically four types of ways to provide the internet. The first is cable, the second is DSL, the third is fiber, and the fourth is satellite. I'm probably not going to dive into satellite too much because you only get that if you live in like rural areas and like you don't have access to any other internet. A lot of people do not recommend getting it. However, Elon Musk is working with providing faster satellite internet, so who knows, maybe in a couple of years that'll be a total different story, because I believe you can game on that from my knowledge. But typically you wouldn't want that because you want a dedicated some form of line to the home. So let's jump into cable. Okay, and actually real quick, so legally by the FCC, there can only be one of each provider available in your area, which I don't know why that's the law. That just is. So if your cable provider is Comcast, then it's only Comcast that you can get for cable. If your DSL is going to be CenturyLink, then it's only CenturyLink for DSL. So if you're ever talking to a salesperson on the phone and they're like, hey, I can only, they're like, well, you've already talked to them, or the only other option, they're probably right. Sometimes there's random, like, smaller companies in the area that are local that can do it. But for the most part, that's just how it is for the law's sake. I don't know why. But with that being said, the reason why I actually know a lot of this is because I used to do sales for CenturyLink. It sucked. Hated it. One of the worst jobs. Made a lot of money, but it sucked. But they taught me all these tactics, and I thought that they were all BS until I went to college, and they're like, no, that's exactly how it works. So that's pretty fun. So I said I was going to jump into cable, so now I'll actually do that. Okay. So first thing that you need to know about cable is it uses the infrastructure of cable companies, right? So you're just tapping into what's already existing. It is high-speed internet, but it's delivered through coaxial cable, that little weird little round peg that you usually plug TVs into. That's where you plug your modem/router. So with that, there is a huge issue with it, though. If you do use cable internet, you are sharing that internet. So what that means is you may be paying for 1,000, whatever megabits per second, and if you hop on and you may be hitting 900, but it's going to fluctuate a lot. You may get down to 200 megabits, you may get up to 5, especially if you hop in around 5 p.m. when everyone's getting off of work and they're coming home and they also have cable internet. It's going to do the same exact thing. It's going to drop. Everyone's pulling from the same thing, so you don't have a dedicated line. So that can be an issue if that's something you're looking into and you're wanting to get internet. That's something you should know, is that it's very possible that you're going to have a lot of fluctuation with your internet. See, I have internet through Comcast, through Xfinity, whatever. But I went with that knowing that I was going to have shared bandwidth because the other speeds that were offered were so small, and I'll dive into that later on. But just know that is one of the biggest flaws using Xfinity, any cable type provider, is you are sharing that bandwidth. It's going to fluctuate a lot. So you're not really getting a guaranteed price for what you're paying for. So it's good to know that going in. Now let's jump into DSL. So DSL stands for Digital Subscriber Line. And yes, I read that because I could not remember what it was. And that's done through copper lines. And so this huge advantage of using this is that you're using a dedicated line to your home. Okay, so as opposed to cable that I just mentioned, it is truly yours. It doesn't share with anybody else. That's your speed all the time. Granted, as you add more devices, you're going to be in someone else's streaming. It's going to, go down, but not fluctuate nearly as much. I mean, honestly, jump on it in a given time in the morning when no one's on the internet. If you're using using cable, Xfinity, whatever, do a speed test. Jump on when everyone gets home from work in your area, and do the speed test. You're going to see it's going to be a lot lower. That doesn't really happen with DSL because it is truly a dedicated line. It is interesting, though. It does go through your phone lines. It uses those copper lines. So the key thing is that it uses them. It's not dial-up like the old 90s or early 2000s technology. But it just uses the same lines that those use. Yeah, so that's one thing about it, though, is DSL is going to be widely available. You're going to have a lot of options usually to have that. But in the case that I had, I hopped on and I saw that CenturyLink was offered here, but it only offered 80 megabits per second. So it is a dedicated line. However, I was like, I do gaming and a bunch of work from home, and I have all these other things that I do. So I said, well, I actually would rather pay for cable, which is higher because it has way higher megabits per second, although it isn't a dedicated line and it is shared. But if I can get 1,000 off of that, even if it fluctuates and it goes all the way down to 200, that 200 is still going to be higher than the 80 megabits I'm going to be getting. So that's something to look into. Sometimes it's vice versa. It's always something to look into when you're getting an internet service provider. Along with that, there's also going to be, there's ADSL, which is, I can't remember what the A stands for. Asymmetric? I think it's asymmetric. So it's fast download, slow upload, which isn't a huge deal for a lot of people. They're mainly caring about the download. Then there's SDSL, which is same upload and download. And then there's VDSL, which is very high bit. So it can deliver super fast internet, but at short distances. So not widely available. I don't really know if they would even disclose that to you if you asked your DSL provider what they have. I don't know. That's really no idea. So now let's jump into fiber, which is the cream of the crop, what everyone's wanting to get because it is extremely fast. So these first two technologies I mentioned were all done through wire. We're all, copper cable or using the already standing cables that are there for coaxial. But fiber is different. Fiber's faster, fiber's better because fiber uses light. It's not going through copper wires or anything like that. It is traveling through light. And that's important to know because the internet, how it works, the mainstream of the internet, kind of hard to explain, but like the big lines that are ran through, those are all powered via light. And it's all fiber optic. So fiber is what you want because light, as we know, if you go to any class you've ever taken in your life, speed of light, that's fast, that's super quick, right? That's the fastest we can conceive in our minds to go. Fiber is going to be way better. If fiber is offered, then you take it. Now, this is where it gets kind of confusing because there are fiber companies that do just fiber for the area. And then there's also companies that, let's go, for example, CenturyLink at DSL, they do offer fiber. So they have a way of using fiber and distributing it to homes. But in that case, fiber, and that's the issue, is if you're using that from something like CenturyLink where you're doing dedicated lines still, fiber is going to only be able to have limited amount that they can give out before they're going to start going down in speeds. And you're not going to get the 940 megabits per second or whatever it may be. Okay, so let's recap. There are 4 ways of receiving internet. The first is going to be cable, the second is DSL, the third is fiber, and the last is satellite. I didn't really touch on satellite because there's a lot of things going on with that. Maybe I'll touch in a later video. But if you ever are moving or you're looking for a new internet service provider, your ISP, right, you're only going to be having really 3 options to use from. And typically it's just going to be the 2, cable and DSL. And as I mentioned, through FCC law, there can only be one of each. There can only be one cable and one DSL. But in some rare instances, there are third parties that are allowed to be there that you can also pull from. And now with fiber does have some companies in local areas that are just dedicated fiber they can bring to your home. or they usually team up with CenturyLink or Xfinity, whatever it may be. So knowing these kinds of things are really going to help you when you're looking at the internet, because you can understand, do I want shared bandwidth or do I want a dedicated line? Because in some cases, the shared bandwidth is better than the dedicated line, because the dedicated line can only give you so much. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, whatever. But thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.